Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another In Conversation with myself, Paul Salahuddin Armstrong. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Ed Buckner from Atlanta in Georgia in the United States of America. So good, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to everyone in the UK. Good morning to everyone in the United States. And good evening to anyone else in the world, if that happens to be a different time. In a time when so many conversations feel like contests to be won, rather than opportunities to understand each other, I wanted to do something a little different. Today is not a debate, it's conversation. And not just any conversation, it is one rooted in a real friendship. I'm joined by my good friend, Ed Buckner, a former president of American Atheists, a thoughtful voice within the secular world, and someone who I've had the privilege of knowing for a number of years. We first met in London at a debate, believe it or not, about Islam and atheism. But in reality, it quickly became something else. The conversation shifted into questions of political and legal systems, how societies should be ordered, and what kind of framework best allows people of different beliefs to live together with dignity. And in that moment, I found myself drawn to Ed's approach, not because I agreed with him on theology, because obviously we don't and we won't, but because what he was articulating was grounded and principled, accessible to everyone, rooted in citizenship, civil liberties, rights, and responsibilities, a framework that allows people of faith and people of no faith to live side by side. And interestingly, what was being presented in the name of my religion on the other side, something far more rigid, more coercive, removed from the realities of our time, and it did not reflect at all the kind of Islam in which I believe and I've lived all these years. In fact, if we look carefully at what is often claimed to be the model of the Prophet in Mecca, we find something far closer to what Ed shared in that discussion than some kind of closed theocratic kind of space or system. And that moment stayed with me, not as a point scored in a debate, but the beginning of a friendship. So now I will pass over to my good friend Ed. And please say a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Okay. Well, first about myself, I am old and past it, I believe is the correct phrase.
I see
But
that.
I am truly honored to be on Paul's show, this show In Conversation, which I think is very much the right approach to all sorts of differences, not just between atheists and Muslims, but between conservatives and liberals, between socialists, any ideology, belief system, etc. And I am touched and pleased that Paul harkens back to when we first met. That was a very important time for me, and it has echoed in my thoughts ever since. This was in 2010 in Conway Hall.
Yeah.
I was there for a debate, one of which I'm very proud in general. And it happened to be on Father's Day in the U.S., celebrated Father's Day, and my son came to that event, and that pleased me. But when I was sitting outside waiting to go in, this guy came up, said that, he thought he agreed with me on at least some of these items and was looking forward to the debate. And I was pleased with that. I thought, oh, okay, this is probably one of these secular Londoners. That's wonderful. And then we went in and had the debate. I forgot to bring my notes with me, but it was a subject that I had talked about a lot of times before, so I wasn't too worried about not having them. And among other things in the course of that debate, and it was a good and pleasant debate. Not all debates are, but this one was. I did not agree with my opponent, nor did he agree with me. We were not debating on on atheism versus Islam, but on secularism. And I certainly disagreed with him, but he was cordial and polite, and the moderator was reasonable. It was a good experience. I've lost any video of that debate, and I hate that I have. But as the debate unfolded, I brought up some ideas and asked my opponent if he agreed with these points, and said, if you do agree with them, then I think you'll agree with me on secularism in general. And then fast forward to going past the opening statements and the rebuttals and so forth. And we got to the Q&A, and the guy on the other side, as I said, he was very civil, and I was not unhappy with the demeanor that was going on. But I noticed that he really had not particularly responded to my points that were intended to engage us in additional exchange and understanding, not intended to win the debate. And this guy in the audience, the one who had met with me briefly outside, raised his hand and asked my opponent to comment on those four things that I had brought up. And he actually read them all. He had taken careful notes. And I thought, wow, that is so thoughtful and respectful and intelligent. And that's the way we should have exchanges.
Mm.
And that person who met me before and asked these questions in the Q&A was, of course, Paul Armstrong. And we didn't, at that time or any time since, have some heated debate on the uh, obvious truth of atheism or the obvious truth of Islam. We disagree. We're not stupid. We know we disagree. We know it's very important. I have no doubt whatever that Paul Armstrong is devout. I think the organization for which he is the managing director, the Association of British Muslims, is the perfect sort of an organization for any religion or ideology or what have you. I encourage people to go to the website for the Association of British Muslims. And I think one little thing I saw on there may encapsulate better than anything else I've seen. There is a little box on there that says, we Muslims have one word for Jews, shalom. And I thought, that's perfect. It's not an attack on Judaism. It's obviously not, you didn't, and it's very important that you didn't, as an organization or Paul in his things with me, at no point have you compromised your principles, and you
No.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Your principles are very important to you, as mine are to me. And in order to have a genuine conversation, exchange, and mutual respect for each other, we all need to not compromise our principles, but to think about them and to know what they are. And as Paul, I'd almost think Paul could represent me better than I represent myself, because his introduction clarified exactly secularism and freedom of uh, religion, but freedom of thought is actually more important to me than atheism is. I believe very much in freedom of religion. I don't believe in freedom of action, no matter what, because there are some limits, and there have to be to
Yeah.
satisfy my principles. But freedom of thought is crucially important to our humanity, to our progress as a species, to our cultures, and ultimately whether Paul and Islam is correct or whether some more atheistic approach is correct. No matter which it is, in order to make progress and succeed and get to where we need to get to, we need to have this mutual respect. And that means we need to stick to our principles, but not be arrogant. And by
Yeah.
arrogant, I don't mean somebody who doesn't think, I think I'm right. Believe me, I think I'm right on atheism and on a lot of other things, and I can defend what I think. But the difference with my insisting that I'm at least working to avoid being arrogant is I don't think that I am right so certainly that it's okay for me to brutalize or kill or fight or even outlaw the people who disagree with me. And I think that's crucial for all of us, not just for atheists. I certainly am not just trying to preach to the religious folks. I've known atheists who are uh, blindly stupidly devoted to their position so much that they won't tolerate or consider any other possibility. And that is a fundamental mistake. It really is. Now you ask about me. I'm an old guy. I'm retired from pretty much everything except writing my blog, Letters to a Free Country, which I invite people to read. Got people, a very few people from all over the world who read it, and it delights me that they do. But what matters is mutual respect. And again, it's not just Islam. I have right here in the building, I live in a condo, the building that we live in, we have some neighbors who are very devout, probably, I would say, fundamentalist, whether they would call themselves that or not, I'm not 100% sure, Christians. And boy, do they disagree with Diane and I on religion, and for that matter, on politics too. I think Trump is the worst president that's ever been a president of the United States for a whole lot of reasons. And they're, I think, fans of his, or at least they're conservatives. But they're the best people you could ask for as neighbors. And I suspect we had living in the same building at one time some Muslims. I don't know whether they use the term to refer to themselves as Muslims, but if so, they were certainly moderate Muslims. And the woman who lived there, her parents came and stayed extensively, and they were from Canada. And one time they decided to rent the local clubhouse and have a wonderful meal for all of us around.
Wow, it's
It
nice.
was just grand. It was, great food and wine and wonderful companionship. And you miss so much of that if you fixate on one simple-minded version of what matters to you. And we all need not to do that.
Mm.
I've talked too long. Paul, tell me what else you want to know.
No, this is, I think, the point. It's if people are so narrow-minded that they do not give that space to other people and respect people, you miss out on so many friendships, you miss out on cultural exchange, you miss out on learning opportunities, you miss out on education, you miss out on just so many things that you can share together as a society. And I mean, you think about it, on this earth, what, there's 7 or 8 billion of us? I mean, how on earth are 7 or 8 billion of us going to believe the same thing? I mean, even if you get 10 Muslims in the room, they're going to have 10 different understandings of Islam. Same with Jews, same with Christians, even
Same
atheists. They're
with
going to have different philosophies of what they understand. And it's like, so we have to have something that we understand, like a code between us, is how we understand each other and how we respect each other, that this doesn't cause a problem and we can actually benefit from all of this. I mean, I actually like talking to people who have different ideas, because what am I going to learn from talking to people who think like me? I'm not going to learn a thing, because yeah, okay, you agree with this, yeah, I agree with that, oh wonderful, you believe that too? Yeah, I believe that too. Oh, what good's that? What are we going to learn? I mean, nothing. I mean,
Well, I
actually
think
there's
you
a
can
book
learn.
that,
I
yeah.
think you can learn and enjoy things from people you have important things in common. I am
Oh
quite
yeah,
sure.
but I mean everything. If it was
Yeah,
everything,
you don't want
I
to do
mean,
that
obviously.
only that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you and I, we differ on the existence of God. But as soon as we get to the subject of civil liberties, of respecting one another, of how we're supposed to interact with each other within the society, legal issues, things like this, we actually have tremendous common ground on these things. Although,
Absolutely.
so I mean, why fixate on that one thing that we're never going to agree upon? You're never going to convince me there's no God. I'm never going to convince you that there is. It's like I know you've researched this. You're a clever guy. You've looked into it and thought about it for many, many years. And the same with me. So, I mean, we're not going to change on that because we're both convinced.
Well,
Um,
actually, I think it's sort of even if you just want to be so cynical that you just want to look for what is best
mm,
tactically or strategically. If you or anyone as a Muslim wants to persuade other people to become Muslims, the first step is you must find a way to convince them to be mutually respectful and to be open to what you have to say. And you're never going to do that by browbeating them and shouting at them and saying, oh my God, you must believe this. So strategically speak, even if all you care about, you don't care
Well,
about
Muslims
humanity, you
do
don't
my
care
head in
about,
who behave in that way, let alone, people of other beliefs. So, I mean, why would people be attracted to that? In fact, one
yeah,
of the biggest causes of people leaving Islam today are because of Muslims who behave in exactly that way. And the same is true of Christianity, of course. And any other religion that goes down that path. I mean, and I'm not saying the religions as a whole do, because obviously the type of Islam I practice is not like that. But and there's many types of Christianity that are not like that. But there are those that are browbeating, that are crazy, that are intolerant. And again, the thing that I think when you brought up what you were saying just before, intolerance. This is, and people have become more intolerant, I think. When I was younger, I didn't find this level of intolerance that we find now, where, people can't abide to be in the same room as someone who thinks differently from them. Um, I don't get that. That's really bizarre to me. That's just not the way that I was raised and not the way that I understand people.
I think it's gotten worse in many ways. We've become more likely to get into our own little uh, towers of agreement on something and refuse to even contemplate any other possibility. And it's not a good way to live. It's not a good way to be
Mm.
happy, to make progress, to get it. It's not even a good way to promote your atheism or your Islam or your Christianity or anything
Mm.
else that you want to promote. It's foolish and it's wrong-headed and it's dangerous. It really is.
It is. And the other thing is that, I mean, when people think differently, when people have a different paradigm, the way they see the world is different. They tend to see things that other people who don't think like them are not seeing. So, and vice versa. So, I mean, unless we actually listen to each other and learn what the other person is seeing, then we're missing out on a lot of information, a lot of perspectives that we wouldn't have otherwise. There's a book that actually you recommended to me some years ago by a man who's sadly long since passed away, Carl Sagan, called In a Demon Haunted World.
Oh
And
yeah.
you
Wonderful.
recommended me that book some years ago, and I read it and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It is an amazing book. And in that book, he talks about so many things about how humans have biases. Yeah, literally, I've got exactly the same cover as that. I mean, it's at the university though; it's not here. Otherwise, I'd show you. But in that, one of the things he highlights is about biases, that we've got biases built into us in the way that we see things. So, for instance, human beings have a bias at recognizing human faces and tend to see faces in things that do not have a face. Even in rocks that have been randomly found by a rover on Mars or something, people start to see faces on things. And yet you take a frame later that's looking at the same rocks, and you can clearly see that there's no face there. But then people will get those things and make stuff up about it that is clearly unbased and untrue. But that doesn't seem to matter to them. It just goes over their heads. And Carl Sagan, he highlighted some of the things like this, and also about how you also get people that abuse the fact that they know people are like that by nature. Unless they check that, then and then they manipulate people. And whether those people who are doing the manipulation are religious people, whether they're political people, and I think we've seen both in our times, of
Absolutely. Yeah.
whether they're ideological in a non-religious way or in a religious way. But there are people that abuse people's biases and people's instincts and to manipulate them. And I think this is a very dangerous thing, and it is something that we need to be very careful of.
Boy, do I agree. It's we human beings definitely have biases, and of course, the ones we don't know we have are the ones that are really dangerous. But even the ones we do know we have, we should pay attention to and do what we can to ameliorate and minimize the effects of that bias. But and Daniel Dennett also wrote about the image of I think it was Kennedy in a mountain that people who have that particular bias, American whatever, tend to see, and others couldn't see it at all. And if you just shifted slightly, you can't see it either. So
Oh,
it's
what about that giant tree trunk that you've got in America? You know, that in a park, you know, it's when trees used to be the size of, you know, reaching right up to the horizons.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's obviously a volcanic, you know, plug. What was left, you know, when all the rock was eroded. But how many people see that? And I mean, I've seen this online. People still circulate this stuff, and you just think, well, just a little bit of basic scientific understanding would get rid of that, you know. But then, and that is another thing that I do fear in this time, that we really are. I mean, it's like flat earthers. You know, there are people that are absolutely convinced that the world is flat in 2026. That
sure.
Artemis rocket, it never really went around the moon. You know, even though the whole thing was live streamed. You know, it's like, how on earth do you fake that? Even with telescopes on the Earth that were watching the spacecraft the whole time that they could, going all the way towards the moon. But no, that's all fake, apparently. I mean,
Well, it has to be one hell of a giant conspiracy with billions of people
yeah,
in on it.
yeah.
And
Literally most of the Earth's population. I mean, it's really remarkable.
yeah, and
Yeah.
people get so excited. Perfect example down in down England. You can go to uh, Charles Darwin's home, and it's it's a beautiful and interesting home. But the reaction in America still to evolutionary theory, instead of saying, okay, well, these are the things that support it, and here's they it's a article of faith that you have to undermine this scientific idea in order to support your religion, instead of adjusting and making sure you're seeing the world more intelligently. And I cannot tell you how many times I have come across a creationist, a young earth creationist, or even the more modern versions of it, who, when you ask them, okay, what did Charles Darwin say about the human eye? And they don't know. They didn't read it. They disagree with something they haven't read
Oh yeah.
and don't
Mm.
understand. And they don't understand the awe that he shows you in the end of his book, then Carl Sagan in The Demon Haunted World. Both these great scientists and great thinkers are awestruck by the universe, and they want you to be astonished and amazed and filled with awe. And if in fact that means that you are filled with awe and conclude that yes, there must be Allah or a creator of some sort, fine. It's not how I would see it, but it is how
Mm.
some do. And the problem is not disagreeing over whether there's this creator or not. The problem is disagreeing over what the facts are, what the actual
Mm.
things you can see in the actual evidence, and disagreeing about the logic of things. So it's boy, it's important. And if in my opinion, all 2 billion Muslims in the world and all however many atheists there are in the world could sit down and have conversations and glory in the great positives of Islamic culture and the
Mm.
important sense that you should be open your home to visitors and strangers, and that you should enjoy a meal together, and that you should have uh, be aware of the need for charity, which I think is Muslims probably overall do a better job even than Christians, or certainly than atheists. The principles of other fields of thought can teach us things, but they can't if our minds are closed.
Oh, 100%. It's interesting you brought up about evolution as well, because I mean, it's bad enough when you've got Christians who are on that line of thought. But you know, when Darwin published his book, do you know one of the criticisms that was thrown at him in the United Kingdom back, you know, at the time? He was
Well, I
accused of promoting the Mohammedan theory of creation.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
which of course the Muslim theory of creation, and there was precedent for it because 1,000 years before Darwin put pen to paper, there was actually a scholar called Al-Jahiz who wrote basically a theory of evolution.
hmm.
And these ideas permeated in the Muslim world that even Ibn Khaldun in his Muqaddimah referred to it. Rumi kind of referred to it. He didn't refer to it in a scientific way, but you can see the ideas there in some of his poetry and elsewhere as well. So, and the fact that Ibn Khaldun was also talking about it in a similar way that, like now, we will talk about like evolution of other things, nothing to do with evolution, but that the idea, like social evolution or the evolution of a product, because the idea is familiar to people. And it must have been familiar for him to use it in these other contexts. And yet nowadays we have Muslim creationists who basically believe in young earth creationism that is lifted right out of Southern Baptist type seminaries. And all they've done is replace that with references to the Quran and Hadith and stuff instead of to the. It's just like, well, how did we get there when we were here? It's like I, I find that really bizarre. It is one of those things that I mean,
they they can't make progress because they're tripping over their own feet.
yeah. And if they knew anything about the history of Islamic scholarship, then it's very hard to kind of oppose what Darwin put out. It's just a development of the same ideas. Um, and it doesn't matter whether, I mean, from a religious perspective, whether a person is a Christian or a Muslim or some other belief, it doesn't matter, exactly how God created things. I mean, from my perspective, I see that the evolutionary process is the hand of God. It worked through natural processes. That's how God does things. I mean, he's not like a potter who makes little things out of clay and breathes. I mean, that wouldn't be God. I wouldn't
I'm,
recognize that as a God.
I'm
Um,
sorry, but if you're going to go around saying that there's a creator behind it, I'm going to have to shut my computer and leave. We can't have this. We have to understand that I'm right and you're wrong. Surely you understand
yeah,
that.
exactly. And it's just it's very frustrating, and it's like what they actually portray as divine is something that even you would look. I mean, you get like Richard Dawkins talks about a flying spaghetti monster, and it's like, where did he get this idea from? It's like, because the thing that some people portray as a divine, it's just like, why would you even believe in that? Because that's if there is a God that created the universe, it's obviously going to be something way beyond anything that we can understand as creatures living on this little tiny planet that is no smaller than like a speck of sand within our galaxy, let alone the universe
Yeah.
in scale perspective. Um, so I mean, it is really bizarre, and how these things get bought. I mean, the kind of concept of God that I have, it's just like it's really something that is beyond our imagination and comprehension and everything, and
Oh,
so simplistic
it
notions just don't fit.
seems to me that it's very insulting to this God in whom you believe that you think he is so limited that he can't do it the way you want him to do it or think
Well,
he did.
quite, yeah, exactly.
Charles
Yeah.
Darwin was by no means the first person to, or even very close at all to being the first to think that evolution was a
Mm,
likely process that needed explaining. What he did that was revolutionary was not to posit the possibility of evolution, but to come up with a mechanism where that made sense theoretically, and then show
mm.
humongous amounts of evidence, tediously boring evidence, if you if you're interested in whatever
Yeah,
beetle, mollusk, or
I think
whatever.
maybe that's part of the problem, because I mean, I've looked into this over the years myself. And I mean, when you know about the anatomy of all vertebrates and how they all share a similar body plan, and you can actually trace back how things evolved and the structure of brains, for instance, in mammals compared to the still got where you can see what the reptilian brains used to be, and how it's expanded in mammalian creatures and also within birds as well. And then when you look at like the distribution of Nothofagus, which southern beach within the southern hemisphere, and you find them in South America, you find them in Australia, you find them in New Zealand. And it's like you even find the leaves washing out of the melting ice in Antarctica, which shows that at one time, I mean, that's plate tectonics, but also it's evolution as well. That shows that it was all linked together and that they come from the same family. And you do not find them in the northern hemisphere until we brought them here and stuck them in our gardens. I mean, so many things like this that you can't just ignore that kind of evidence. I mean, once you know it. But again, I think this is part of the problem. A lot of people are just wouldn't even know what I was talking about there because they've not looked into it.
Well, it's not just ignorance, although that's very much a part of it.
Mm,
It's you're depriving yourself of all of the pleasures of an astonishing set of facts, universe, a plant, whatever it is you're
mm,
looking at, the stars. If you limit it to only one preconceived notion, whether that's a religious or an atheistic, doesn't matter. It's it's closing it off before you get a good look. That's such a mistake.
it
And
is. And I mean,
very,
I
very
mentioned
common.
Richard Dawkins, and it's like he's a person that I love actually some of the stuff he's done on evolution. It's brilliant. I mean, that's obviously his subject that he's an expert on. But once he actually starts talking about religion and stuff, and you think, well, you're not you're not a theology. You do not actually know some of the things you're talking about, and it's a bit embarrassing actually, and he has been picked up when he's been, interviewed by some people on this. And this is the thing, it's whoever you are, it's like if you're going to talk on something, at least do a bit of reading up on it and a bit of research before you actually talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean,
Well,
not to knock his science, I mean, his popular science is actually very good. Um,
sure. Well, I think Richard Dawkins has been a force for good, a tremendous force for good, and I'm a huge admirer of his.
I think
But
overall he probably has. I mean, I'm not going to
does
knock
he
that
have
down.
flaws? I mean, I'm even willing in my rare moments to admit that I have flaws. So I guess I should freely admit that Richard Dawkins probably has some too. What the heck?
Mm.
Maybe even Paul Armstrong. I don't know.
Every single one of us does. That's the thing. It's like, as we said earlier about arrogance. I mean, when anyone puts themselves there as if they know all the answers, whether they're an atheist or they're a religious person, um, that's a very dangerous position to put
Yes.
oneself in because firstly, you stop learning. As soon as you think like that, you stop learning. You stop checking yourself. Even St. Paul said in the Bible, you should check yourself morning and evening. Otherwise, why? Why did he say that? Because he was aware of it as someone who was a religious leader, that if people don't check themselves, then they're going to make mistakes and they're not trying to do anything about it. And then that can just get worse and worse and worse until you end up making some really, really terrible mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, but also, I mean, one of the things I think it's like we're having a very comfortable conversation here. And again, it's because we're comfortable in our own shells in what we believe. We're comfortable with our beliefs. We're comfortable with each other. Whereas a lot of the people that you find tend to be the loudest and most radical in their views, whatever their beliefs are, I tend to find tend to be, once you just like scratch the surface, they tend to be a bit insecure in what they actually believe.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. Well, I've looked at some of the other conversations that you've had in this series, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. I really am. But I've looked at some of the others and some of the comments, and there are comments on some of those that just are arrogant is the only word I can think of. They say, well, if it doesn't have exactly in common with my view, then why don't we just reject it? Because we cannot, any of us, be arrogant enough to think that we are 100% sure that we have all the answers
Mm.
and that our learning is at an end, and so is everybody else's. That's just not the truth. That's not reality. And recognizing that it's not is very important. And to repeat myself.
No, it's true. I mean, actually, we actually have precedent within the Muslim world. There's a book here I've got, um, the Muwatta of Imam Malik, and he was one of the four sort of hadith compilers within the Sunni world, and he was a great scholar. And when he actually produced this book, he was approached by the authorities at the time, who asked him, "Can we make your Muwatta and your whole thing as the official one that all Muslims have to follow?" And his response was basically, "Heaven forbid! I'm just a human being. I did the best I could. I hope it's useful for people, but I'm not. I'm only a human being. I might have made mistakes, you know. And I want other people to think about it and check it and stuff, not just like follow it blindly. Um, it's a shame when people lose that. They really they can go down a very dangerous path.
I, it's probably boring that we're having a conversation where we agree on everything. Let's talk about something we don't agree on.
No, but I think it. I know that there's someone actually who's posted this on YouTube, because they want us to fight. But it's like we need to have conversations, not just fighting about stuff. Why do people always want to fight? When we need to understand this is not helpful. Just okay. So what? We have a fight over whether there's a God or not, and
Well,
I win. And I win an argument over is Islam correct or not. Then what?
I think
It's like.
I think you would agree with me. I'm not sure, but you're here. If you don't agree, I guess you'll say so. I
Mm,
think that debates, if they are kept civil and reasonable, can be very much learning possibilities. I don't think debates are
mhm,
destructive things necessarily. Conversations are different from debates, and I wanted us, and I knew you did, for this to be a conversation and not a debate. But I, I, I have had debates, lots of debates with Christians. I've had a few with Muslims, and actually the first one I had in London that time when I met you was not a very good debate because I didn't know enough about what I was talking about. I'm
mhm,
not saying that I lost the debate or won it. I I didn't change my mind. I thought I was right. This was atheism versus Islam. But I didn't know what I was talking about well enough to have a good debate. But if both parties or all the parties to a debate are knowledgeable about what they're talking about and properly
mhm,
respectful of each other, I think a debate, an argument, a disputation can enlighten people and can help people who are watching it and even the ones who are participating in it to get a better understanding. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think everything should be a debate. I think we need, as human beings, to conscientiously avoid debates when it's not appropriate, when a conversation is very much more in order. But I would defend the idea of having debates,
oh,
and I do think
definitely.
they're worth having.
No, I actually do. I do agree on that because I mean I've took part in debates myself, and when there's a cause for it, we should have those debates. But it's like when it comes to atheists and Muslims and people of belief talking, it often unfortunately gets we debate things that whether we debate it or not, it's already been debated 100 or 1,000 times beforehand, and it's the same topic. And this is something that I actually find that boring when people just keep going around the same things. I mean, when
Well,
you go back to
you
that debate in London that you had, you actually made better points than the other person, even though it wasn't maybe your strongest subject, but you did make very good points because they were simple principles that you put forward. That if you don't have those established within the society, I know you've done a work on promoting civil liberties in the past in the US, and I
yes.
believe you also co-authored a book more recently on freedom to believe or something.
In
Um,
Freedom We Trust, I co-authored it with
yeah.
my son, Michael. It's been a while back. It's not very recent. It was 2012 when it came out, not
Oh
too
wow,
long
so
after.
it is a while back, yeah.
But it's a book I stand by and am very proud to have co-authored with my son. And you know, I when you saw me in that debate in Conway Hall, I articulated these four ideas that I still hold and say are important. And I think Muslims and Christians and Jews and Buddhists and everybody else would likely agree with all 4 points. And that is, we disagree, we human beings, in like you said, if you put 10 Muslims in a room, they're going to have 10 slightly different interpretations of Islam. And they might have some pretty sharp differences, but they at least are going to have some
Can
slight
do, yeah.
differences.
Mm.
If you put 10 atheists in a room, 10 Christians, same thing. And we need to be aware of that people have differences on religion. And secondly, we have to understand that human beings, that goes for every one of us, are subject to fallibility in our judgments. We make mistakes. We vote for the wrong person to represent us in Parliament or in Congress or for president or prime minister. Well, I understand prime minister is selected in a different way, but anyway, uh,
You vote for the party, yeah, and yeah.
yeah, there are differences and we make mistakes. Every one of us. I mean, I promise you, any honest person would say, I have made mistakes in the past on who I voted for or what. So why don't you think you could make mistakes on religion too? The third item of all this, in addition to the fact that uh, we differ and we have fallible judgment, is that religious truth cannot be settled by voting or by force. Religious truth has to be contemplated, argued about, and even then you're never likely to get it resolved because people start with different assumptions and have weigh things differently. And then the fourth thing is just religious liberty or property, liberty of conscience is worth protecting in and of itself. Whatever else we see it implying about things, it's worth protecting. If all of us agree on all four of those things, then we ought to trust in freedom. And freedom does not mean that you must agree with me on being an atheist. It does mean that the government shouldn't take sides for the most part. The government represents all of us, and individuals and organizations of individuals, like the Association of British Muslims, can do all kinds of things together on the things that they decide are important and work towards those. But the organization that represents all of us that is supposed to, the government, should not put its finger on the scales.
These really are important points. And, someone who is commenting here, quite a few comments actually, they say this is mediocrity. I would very much disagree with that because at the end of the day, if we do not have freedom, if we do not protect those civil liberties, any one of us can be squashed, by an administration or by a group of people within society who don't approve of us. I mean, and I was actually visiting Auschwitz just a few weeks ago, and I saw what can happen when that situation occurs. And this is something we always have to be on our guard with. And people, they think, oh, Nazi Germany and things like that. But what they don't realize, Hitler was elected in. You know,
Yeah.
Germany was a democracy at that time. It wasn't a dictatorship at first, and they elected in a person who became a dictator. And because enough people didn't oppose him at that time and get him removed from office, then what happened? We know.
Yeah.
And it's just one
And he
example. I
was
mean, it's the most stark example, but it is just one example of situations like that have occurred. And this is why every country needs to have checks and balances, as our king highlighted,
crucial.
very recently during his visit to the United States when he was hosted by your president. And he highlighted the fact that the foundation of America was built on checks and balances. And
It
this
was,
is ensuring the protection and freedom of every single citizen, whatever their beliefs, whatever they, wherever they're from, whatever their ethnicity. It's when those things get eroded, either in your country or mine or in other countries, then none of us are safe. I mean, we've got a situation in the UK at the moment where anti-Semitism is spiraling, anti-Muslim hate is spiraling. We've had problems with anti-Hindu hate. I mean, literally hate of all different kinds. And this is going hand in hand with an increase in violent crimes on our streets, some of which are racially or religiously motivated, others which are just part of this increase in violent crime. And it doesn't even get reported on the news as much as it did before. And I'm not even sure it's been taken as seriously as it would have been at one time. And that I find really frightening, to be honest. That's not a good state to be in at all.
It has struck me as a huge irony. I went not a month ago with my wife to a No Kings rally because we were very unhappy with Trump and his uh, attempts to be an aristocracy or an autocracy, I mean. Um, and then I hear from King Charles speaking to the U.S. Congress, and it's King Charles who is emphasizing correctly the need for checks and balances and the restrictions that should be on the person in power. And he's no George III, but he he successfully, in my opinion, lectured Trump in our own government. And there's a great irony in that when you had the people that I associate mostly with politically strongly anti-king, but not anti this king, at least not these ideas. He is, in my opinion, sadly, very much more intelligent and more reasonable and better educated than our own president by far. And our own president is not quite a fundamentalist, anti-Muslim, anti-atheist or whatever, but he is, I mean, I think he's mostly a fundamentally pro-Trump, no matter what else. That's his true. Uh, but, but at least some of his followers are blindly Christian nationalists and don't understand that to have their freedom protected as well as mine, they need to support secularism. And that definitely means supporting real rights, not just superficial apparent rights for Muslims. We don't have to agree with Paul Armstrong about the details of what's the correct interpretation of the Quran or the Hadith or whatever. But we do have to give him the liberty not only to believe what he wants, but to say what he wants to say about it. And it's not mediocre at all. We want excellence in every part of our lives. We want people who are willing to do hard work to become knowledgeable, scholarly, deep understanding of all kinds of different things and be the best they can possibly be. So your commenter who thinks this is mediocrity misses the point very, very obviously and deeply. I mean, they really miss what we're talking about. We don't want to have everybody reduced to the same common ground. That's not the point. We do want the common ground that we do have to be protected and allow for the differences of all sorts, not just atheist versus Muslim, but all sorts of differences.
Well, something happened on my university campus maybe a year or year and a half ago, probably a year and a half ago. There was a speaker who came on, and she was a Muslim lady who wanted to talk about her sex life. And she was being hosted, and obviously, although she's Muslim, she believed in, freely expressing sexually and having whichever partner she wanted, and not necessarily living by the same rigid code that some Muslims might live. And obviously, I had some young Muslims. They come to me as a Muslim chaplain, and they were complaining. They were saying, "How can we have this? You need to do something to stop her." And I said, "I hear you. I understand your concerns, and I understand this is difficult for you." I said, "But you have to understand this is a university, and at a university, you also have Muslim events where you invite speakers, and they say things that there are going to be many people at this university who would profoundly disagree with. But they give you the space and allow you to do that. She's using exactly the same freedom in order to have her event, and her audience wanted her to speak and invited her because she wrote a book on this, and she spoke. I said, you have to respect that. Otherwise, if we take it away from her, how quickly do you think it will be before they take it away from you? And you will not be able to have your events either. And they really didn't think about that. They hadn't considered it at all. And I could tell from, it was like just dawning on them when I was actually explaining it. Nobody told them.
Mm. We've had considerable controversy in this country, in our universities, over this obscene and absurd failure to understand that the purpose of a university has to not be an ideological conclusion rammed forward, but an opening, a way of thinking, critical thinking, understanding. Don't take, if a speaker comes on campus and says that, all white people should be killed, I don't want to take them too seriously, and I don't want to let them get to action and all that. But I'd at least like to know better why they're thinking in such a foolish way. And our universities absolutely have to get away from the idea that any ideology, left, right, religious, whatever, cannot be the goal. The goal is thought, critical thinking, openness to ideas, grasping and dealing with things, digging into it, and simple-minded lack of complexity, lack of nuance is a dangerous thing and opposite of what a university should be about.
100%. I mean, this is where we've made progress in learning, and it's not going to happen in a space that you can only all think a certain way. That no progress is going to be made like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I actually, in this particular case, I ended up attending the speech, the talk by this lady, because I wanted to see what she had to say. And you know what?
She didn't
It
convince
wasn't nearly as bad as what I've been told. It was actually, it was quite normal, to be honest. It was based, and she was just talking in a fairly healthy way, I think, about human relationships and how we should approach them. Um, there are going to be aspects that people might not agree with, but the thing is, so what? I mean, there's going to be aspects of what anyone says that people are not going to agree with. But
Sure.
the very fact that they wanted to block her just because she was, speaking about this, it troubled me at the time. I mean, there is a difference, obviously, if someone is being platformed who is inciting hate
Yeah.
or inciting violence. This is different. I mean, I don't support that. Or if they are invited to speak, they must be effectively challenged and not
Yes.
simply allowed to give a polemic. But at the same time, I mean, aside from that, there should be this freedom at universities and in public spaces for people to be able to express themselves.
Agreed. What else did your commenters say that you find disturbing?
Um, Cowardly men unable to have a proper discussion that is not just more stupid platitude, just crap. I'm not going to read all of this, honestly.
Oh no,
I mean,
I'm
it probably give
kidding.
us great amusement, but
I
takes
I
away from what we're talking about.
I
Um,
understand that an atheist who thinks all Muslims should be killed and not
oh,
allowed to live
brilliant.
will think
There's
I'm
one person who
cowardly.
commented on here and they said, I have to know if you read the flyer. Exactly. It's like what we're talking about is actually what we said we were going to talk about. So it's,
Yep.
oh, well, it's
And not
someone
just
obviously had their own idea of what we were going to talk about, even though we
not
made it perfectly clear.
not just the
Um,
flyer about our conversation, but about the whole series, your conversation with the rabbi and with other the football player. These are conversations, not debates, and they are described that way from the beginning. There's no ambiguity about it. There's no come here and see Islam conquer atheism or come here and see Islam conquer Judaism. It's never been that, and you don't want it to be, and for very good reason, well thought out, well-founded reasons, not not because you're a coward, not because I'm a coward.
Mm. As I was talking about chaplaincy, it reminded me of a meeting recently. Now, our chaplaincy at the university has chaplains of all a lot of different religions. Now, not all of them, but quite a few of them. And we had a meeting with some of the university colleagues from other departments that we work with to make the whole thing work. And during this seminar, effectively, that we had, we passed around uh, some statistics, like a little nice booklet that was about statistics. And I happened to notice something that no one else picked up on there, that the largest group by belief on campus was people that didn't have a religion. And one of the things I highlighted there, I said, is when are we going to get a secular humanist chaplain at the chaplaincy? Um, and they said they would consider it. And I really hope they do, because obviously there's a lot of people there that are not getting chaplaincy support.
Yeah.
Or what we would obviously do our best if someone who is an atheist turned up, and a few have in fact turned up and had conversations about things, and I've always reassured them I'm not going to push my religion on you, but if you want to talk about something, and I'll help you where I can. But it did get me thinking, as an atheist person for many years, what do atheists do? Because like obviously if I'm going through things, I'm probably going to pick up the Quran, I'm going to pray, I might meditate, or what do atheists do in that sort of situation?
Well, first of all, atheism is merely a lack of belief and not any
Mm,
coherent philosophy. Secular humanism comes much closer to being a coherent philosophy, but even it is not as dogmatic or we don't have a secular humanist Bible that we can look at and refer to. The
I'm
truth
aware of
is,
that, yeah.
atheists and secular humanists, probably like most Muslims and most Christians, when we have problems, we turn to people we trust. That could be your parent, it could be your brother, it could be your neighbor. That person that you trust, maybe you trust them for reasons that have nothing to do with religion, but you're struggling with your addiction to alcohol or your very unhappy relationship with your boyfriend or whatever. Uh, the solution to that is not to be found in any one place, but in a variety of places. And, uh, you know, some atheists are more likely to trust a psychologist or psychiatrist, and some maybe not. One of the things that uh, Muslims disagree with each other over a huge number of things. There are 2 billion Muslims, and there are many, many, many different subdivisions of Islam. Uh, Same thing with Christianity. With atheism, it's really not subdivisions as much as just not any divisions and not any coherence. It means too many different things to even divide it up into subdivision. So comfort and I don't
That's
really.
really what I'm getting at. It's like that kind of comfort and guidance and support. Because obviously, I mean, atheists like anyone else would need that. I was just
Yeah, sure.
wondering, because it's a personal question, because I'm actually curious. I don't know. So that's why I was asking, how you would actually handle those sort of situations when you have that need.
Well, I think a secular humanist chaplain would be in order and be a reasonable thing. You need to understand, you already do understand, but some of your viewers might not. If you have 42% of the people on a campus don't have a religion, that doesn't mean they all think the same way or even close to it. Some of them may just be apathetic and have paid no attention to it and haven't thought it through. Some of them may be doctrinaire and dogmatic atheists. Some of them. So there is as little chance of successfully representing all of them with a chaplain as there would be of all the Muslims or all the Christians. So but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have somebody who can cohere the ideas. And of course, there are on American campuses, there are some, Harvard has a secular humanist chaplain, and it's a good idea. But that person also needs to not be arrogant and think they can represent all people who don't happen to be Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Islamic. So it's
Not so much
Again,
about the representing, but about the support. I mean, it's like I can't represent all Muslims. My colleague who comes from a different tradition within Islam can't represent all Muslims.
yeah,
We have different Christian chaplains from different churches. But at the same time, when it comes to chaplaincy, I find that there's some interchangeableness between us. It's like if a Christian comes to me, I might be able to support them if the Christian chaplain isn't there, depending on what they wanted. And if they needed more, I would refer them, and vice versa with any of the other chaplains. But it's just more like, obviously, when we're going through things like a Muslim prays or meditates or speaks to an imam or a sheikh, or a Christian might go to a priest. So I was just curious, what an atheist would do in that situation. And I'm sure many of our viewers would probably be as well, because obviously they still have that need in some way or another. We'd have to, I'm just curious.
we're human beings, and whether we like it or not, that comes with limitations and problems and difficulties and ways of coping with things and failures to be able to cope. So yeah, we have
Because obviously, I mean,
need.
if I pray, I'm praying and I believe God's listening, or if I meditate, it's in a way. But obviously, you would think you're talking to the air. So it's like maybe some atheists do that anyway, just to sort of get their feelings off and
Well, I
send their
mean,
thoughts out.
among
But it's
atheists, among
yeah.
atheists, for example, Sam Harris, a famous atheist in the U.S., is big on meditation, thinks it's very important. Others think that's some sort of pseudo prayer and they reject it. I don't see it that way. I don't guess I would say that I do any meditating, but I'm not smart enough to know whether it's good or not. I don't know.
Mhm. Okay, I was just curious.
Yes.
Um, so I think, I mean, now we've been talking for about an hour, so that's what we agreed. So I think maybe unless there's something else you want to share, we should probably start to wrap up.
No, I would share that Muslims around the world who are looking at this show and see Paul Armstrong, he's the model of what you should be if you want to be a good Muslim, in my opinion. But that's from an outsider who doesn't know what a good Muslim really is. But he's also the model of what you should want for trying to persuade other people to respect Islam or to even consider Islam if they're not Muslims. My friend,
Mm. In a very similar way, if somebody wanted to know about atheism, I'd actually point them in your direction, because I think they'd be able to have a good conversation and not be preached at, let's say. Because some atheists, even atheists preach, it's quite
oh,
a strange
absolutely,
thing.
no question.
And
I've been known to do that occasionally too. I know how to
uh,
preach atheism.
but if somebody wanted to know and wanted to understand, I would certainly point them in your direction for the same reason. Um, I do think if more people could have conversations like this, it would be very helpful for the world. And if they didn't just think that it would be boring, to have a conversation. It's what a state
Conversations
of the world, honestly. It's
conversations can be boring, but and if everybody in the conversation agrees on everything, it's very likely to be pretty boring. But conversations among people who disagree about things are a little more likely to be interesting. Interesting is not the end all and the be all, but it's a plus.
I think it is a danger is to, a lot of people, they sell their radicalism with that kind of, they make it exciting and charismatic, and whatever kind of radicalism it is, whether it's ideological, whether it's atheistic, whether it's religious, and we need to be careful of that, because if you get so emotionally high and caught up in something like that and it feels good, well, I don't know if you saw my podcast a couple of days ago about this Ahmadi religion of peace and light that was set up in their office in Crewe. The guy is actually an American Egyptian, very charismatic. He made an Arrivals series some years ago, The Arrivals, a series of conspiracy documentaries that pulled in everything from religion and all sorts of things, and pulled a lot of Muslims and others along with that. And then he's gone and set up his own religion. And now, the other week, a load of them got arrested on all sorts of different, quite serious allegations. Of course, they're allegations. We don't know, how much truth is in that until it's like gone through a court of law. But it is quite worrying where these things can end up when people are just swayed along. And, I hope that this conversation that we've had can serve as a reminder to people to be a bit more grounded. And whatever we believe, whether
Yeah,
we believe there's a God or we don't believe there's a God, whatever kind of, religion or ideology that we believe in, if we can actually be that grounded and check everything first and not just get swept along by the crowd, because we could end up like a bunch of lemmings running off a cliff. And that's not a good situation to be in.
true.
Thank you very much, Ed. It's always a pleasure. And I certainly didn't find you boring. So, sorry about one of my audience.
Oh,
But
that's all right. I enjoyed it very much, and I am indeed honored and pleased to be your friend. I hope it will continue for the rest of my life.
likewise. And I hope we can catch up on your side of the pond sometime. So I'll let you know if I'm coming over, and hopefully we can get a bite to eat or something again.
Or maybe go to a Braves game together.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that would be good to do. Yeah.
All righty.
All right. Enjoy the
Very much.
rest of your day, and
You too.
take care. God bless. Well, I'm saying God bless, but
I'm not, but I am saying good going.
yeah,
You take care.
yeah,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye bye.